Well guys, I'm back again. I apologize, in the last video there was a lot of summer bug noise and things going on in that video, but I just wanted to share a few things with you of what happened this summer and how things went. In this video I want to share with you some of the gear that I'll be using this year. Stay tuned. Well guys, like I said, I'm back again, and I'm going to do some quick reviews over the gear and the things that I'm going to be using this season. And some of this stuff that I'm going to show you, you guys may have seen in some of my past videos. I've not changed my saddle too much. I've added a couple of pieces to my gear, and I want to go over those just a little bit today. So the first thing I want to talk about is a lot of people have different choices to make when it comes to hunting. They're either going to be a still hunter, where they're going to stalk the woods, stay on the ground. Other guys might do preset stands, whether they're ladder stands or hang-on stands. They're going to do things like presets on farms or maybe in locations where they know they're going to get to hunt. And then you have the run and gun style of guys that use their saddle or maybe a lightweight hang-on stand to get in and out of public land, to get in and out of large private properties where maybe they can't leave a stand or they don't want to leave a stand. I personally have a little bit of a mix of those styles. I don't do a lot of still hunting. I don't do a lot of ground hunting. I do hunt out of a blind on occasion. Personally, most of my hunting is out of a saddle. So a little bit more of a run and gun style, even though I do not do a lot of deep public hunting. I do a lot of private ground, not necessarily big farms, 80, 90 acres, and a little bit of public property. But I do a lot of saddle hunting, and so as you guys see here, I have a trophy line saddle, as you can see, and this is an older one. So again, when you talk about budget and cost, I tend to try to lean towards a budget-friendly or a budget-minded approach to hunting. When I bought this, if you watched my previous videos, this was a covert light. It is not a detachable belt. It has to be stepped through. That is probably one of the downsides to this saddle, but it was about $135 when I bought it. It really wasn't a high dollar saddle. It didn't cost me a lot of money up front to get started. I added a couple of pouches from Amazon to give me some flexibility in adding some stuff to my waistline rather than my pack. And so this is still what I'm going to be using a lot this year. I'm looking at possibly doing a few modifications to it, which obviously manufacturers are going to tell you not to do. So I'm kind of on the fence of what I'm going to do to modify this. Just at this point, I'm going to use it as is, but this is my primary way of getting in and out of the woods and hunting, especially in a tree, is going to be my tree saddle. And so if you are a mobile type of a hunter that doesn't like to be carrying a lot of weight on their back, this is one of the options that I have found to be very comfortable, very easy to use. And after getting over that initial kind of abnormal feel that you would get if you've been hunting out of a preset or a pre-hung stand, this is actually a pretty stable and sturdy way to hunt. And so this is my primary stand when I go hunting. I'm going to use a saddle. So I'm going to set that down over here. If you look back in some of my previous videos, you'll see that I was using a little step called a Solo Scout. And I did use that Solo Scout quite a bit about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. And I did have some pretty good hunts out of it. I could get up and down trees pretty easily. Wasn't too hard to set up. The downside that I found to that particular method was it was only about an 8 or 9 inch step. It wasn't a very big step. So what I found myself doing is primarily just leaning on that step and only really able to take a strong side and maybe a 6 o'clock shot. It was very hard to get to the opposite side or the weak side of the tree. So for my birthday, my wife, being the loving wife that she is, was able to get me the Hawk stand. I believe this is the Apex. And they're on Amazon, I think currently right now for about $79 to $80. They're not high dollar. So a little bit heavier than your Predator stands and things like that. But it was also a lot cheaper at $79. And so I use just a regular tightening strap, cam strap on the tree with this. And I used this pretty much all last year when I was hunting. And I found this to be a very stable, easy to use platform that allowed me 360-degree shooting around the tree, good stability, and really provided some pretty pleasant hunts. In fact, if you go back to a couple of videos in last year's deer season with my son and I, was one of the videos, my first doe kill video, if you want to look at that. That was actually out of the stand. I had actually just hung this stand. I hadn't been in the stand 15-20 minutes before I shot that doe. And I was shooting at about a 5 o'clock position right out of the stand. So this Hawk Apex was a really good investment for me. But this was probably my biggest addition to my hunting pack this year. And I just hook it right here on the back of my pack. I've got a little gear tie that I put on it. I tie it to my backpack. I carry it in. When I get to the tree, I undo it, hook it on my belt, and go up the tree. Again, like I said, just a cam strap, nothing major. The other addition that I made to my pack this year and the way that I get up and down the tree, and I've done a lot of research on what I would find to be the best option. And I am not necessarily a tree climbing or arborist type of a person. I can get up and down a tree. I have a very basic understanding of ropes. But what I have found is, getting up a tree with an SRT or DRT type of a method, for me, is probably not the best option or the safest option, to be honest with you. I have looked into some SRT type of options, but I just have not pursued that. So instead of using a cheaper brand stick that I used to have, I had went to those XOP short sticks, and I used those for a while, and I didn't have a problem with them. They were actually pretty nice little sticks. The difficulty I had with them is they were single steps. And so I was having a hard time getting up to a decent height. 15 to 18 feet was where I wanted to be, and I was having a hard time getting up to 15 to 18 feet with those double steps, mainly because they were just too short. And they were a single step on the left and the right, and so by the time I got up the tree and put the next stick on, I really didn't have a lot of distance between sticks. I'm really not a big fan of a lot of swinging aiders and adding aiders to every step. And so what I found was I really wasn't getting a lot of height. 10 to 12 feet was about as high as I was getting. So I added Hawk Heliums. Now these are the 32 inch, I think, 32 inch. They're the longer 3 steps, doubles. And so what I did was I found these, I think, on sale, and I would have to look up exactly where it is that I bought these. I bought these online, and I was doing a Google search, and I found these for about $95. So I got a set of 3, and these have the daisy chain for attaching to the tree. And I have not removed the daisy chain. I'm going to stay with it. And there's some guys that want to go straight into a rope mod and things like that. And I've used a rope mod before actually, but I found that these actually work really well. They're not hard to put on. Got to fudge with them a little bit when you're up in the tree with cold hands or gloves to get them open and actually get the daisy chain ready to put on. But for the most part, it's a pretty easy setup. And I don't do a lot of hunts in just absolute freezing cold weather in my saddle. In fact, a lot of times if it's that cold, I'm either in a blind or maybe a preset stand where I can get in and out of it pretty easily. But this was another addition to my hunting pack, and I really do like them. I've had really good luck with getting up and down the tree fairly quickly, minimal amount of noise, and when I add a 3-step aider here at the bottom, I can get 15 to 18 feet easily without hardly stretching at all. And so I really do like this addition. Again, a budget-minded idea. These were not super expensive, and so if you're looking for a good set of sticks that you can get up and down a tree easily with and not a lot of weight, this is a good way to go. Even with a set of 3 sticks, I can carry these in one-handed very easily. So that's my sticks. This is not a new addition, and as I've talked with budget mindedness in mind, this is a super easy Walmart pack. I think I paid like $19 for it. It's probably getting close to needing to be replaced. I've used it for quite a while, and I put everything in here. I carry my calls on the sides, I carry some of my wind indicators, I carry even a little bit of just different types of scents. This is a scrape that I've been using when I went out to work on scrapes this summer. But I keep stuff in these side pockets. I keep cleanup bags and meat bags and gloves and everything in here, tracking materials. I keep all kinds of other things in here as well. I keep things like hot hands and things like that in my bag in case I need anything. But I can carry pretty much everything in here. I have a small camera set up that I put in here. I have a camera arm in the middle bag, and I carry all of my other hunting gear, extra hats, gloves, things like that in this bag. It's super easy to carry. Has a chest strap that goes across my chest and allows me to carry the sticks or the stand attached to this bag fairly easily. Like I said, I don't do a lot of deep backpacking. I don't go into a lot of deep country where I'm hiking a mile or a mile and a half. So this works really good for me. The last thing I have is, if you go back in my channel, you'll see that I did a video on a Matthews Reason. That's still the bow that I'm using. I put a new string on it about 2 years ago, strings and cables. Been shooting it ever since. It's the bow that's in the video for my first doe. And all I've done is set it up with 2 different types of arrows. I actually had these made last year, and they are just a Predator brand off Amazon. Nothing too fancy. In fact, if I had to guess, these are probably a Chinese type of an arrow or something random like that. I think I paid about $36 for a dozen. These are a 250 spine, and the reason I went with this is I was having issues with tuning my bow with light arrows. The 350, the 400s, they were flexing a lot. They were not flying consistently. And in listening to a couple of local guys talk about their bows, they recommended a stiffer spine. So I did. I didn't want to spend a lot of money on a half a dozen to a dozen of arrows, and then they didn't fly very well. So I went with a cheap one. I wasn't disappointed. The 250 spine made a big difference. The bow has shot a lot straighter, a lot smoother. And I've done 2 things. I have an orange set of arrows that are set up with 125 grain solid 3 fixed blade broadhead and a 100 grain insert to give me a heavy front end arrow. If I'm hunting in maybe a little bit heavier brush, or if I feel like I can't get a real great broadside shot and I might have to make sure ribs and things like that are not a problem. And then I just have your traditional regular insert, same 125 grain broadhead. These are blue and white, and this tells me that this is a regular insert, probably a 350, 325 grain arrow, nothing too heavy, nothing too out of the ordinary. But I would put my blues next to each other, I put my oranges next to each other, and if I needed to hunt in heavier conditions, or if I felt like the better option was a heavier arrow, that's what I'm going to shoot. Some people would say, well, you got to be really careful with your sights. Obviously, they're going to shoot different. And you're right. One of the things that I found in sighting my bow in and shooting the heavy arrow versus the light arrow is obviously my point of impact is slightly lower. But what I have found in consistent shooting at 20 and 30 yards, the difference between the heavy arrow and the light arrow is about 1.5 inches. Maybe not even that. So at 20 yards, they're almost identical impact. At 30 yards, it's slightly low, about 1 inch, 1.5 inches. And at 40 yards, I'm getting a little bit closer to 3 inches. So obviously, I have to keep in mind when I'm hunting that if I'm using the lighter arrow, I'm going to be directly on point of impact and point of aim. If I'm using the heavy arrow, I'm going to be slightly low. I tend to take shots less than 30 yards. Now, if I ran across a buck that was much farther than that, I might have to be tempted to make a shot. But ultimately, most of my hunting setups have been at 30 to 35 yard maximum shot. And so this works out really good for me in my setup. It's a quick detach from my bow, goes easily on and off the bow, easily into my pack or onto the tree, and makes my hunting super easy. So this was a quick rundown of what I'm going to be using for my upcoming bow season. If you guys have any questions, I'd ask, go ahead and put some comments down below. Give me some questions and some feedback of things that maybe you saw here that you'd like some more information on, or maybe just some feedback on how things are working for me. I know that there's going to be a lot of guys out there and say, why are you using cheap arrows? Why not go ahead and spend the money on the high dollar stuff? And you know what? There's a lot of truth to that. And I'm not going to deny the fact that if you're going to buy a cheap set of arrows or a cheap set of broadheads, you're probably going to get what you pay for. One of the things that I found with these broadheads, I'll put a link down below. These are, again, a cheaper, solid 3-blade broadhead. Heavier front end, 125 grain, about an inch cutting diameter. And when I got them, they weren't super razor sharp. I put them on a little bit of high grit sandpaper, put a nice honed edge on the edge of these, took them out hunting. In that video of my doe, I actually made the shot slightly quartering away, and I made a pass-through shot on this doe. She dropped the arrow out 10 yards from where I shot her. The arrow, actually one of my lighter arrows, had actually went through, hit the top of her femur, and had broke off the ball joint on the other side. That arrow is actually still in my quiver. It's this one right here. And I brought it back. You can actually, if I pull it up to the camera, you can see that there's still a little blood on the veins. I took it back home, checked the arrow, put this back on some sandpaper, honed the edge off, and it doesn't even look like it's went through a deer. In fact, the point is not even hardly marred at all. I think I had a little bit of burr on the front end that I had to shave off with the sandpaper. So for, I think it was $26 for a set of 6 broadheads, I found a pretty good setup for not a whole lot of money. A dozen arrows for $36, half a dozen broadheads for $29, and they work great. So sometimes you got to do a little research. You got to look for some options that might be credible, that might be good options, that don't cost near as much money. And so that's what I'm trying to share with you guys. So if you do have comments, if you do have questions about the gear, or if you do have things that you would like to see happen on the channel, put some stuff down below. Make a comment, ask a question, try to work that into my next video, or I'll try to add that into what I'm doing come this fall. Stay tuned to the channel, guys. Hope you like what you're seeing. Follow along. Stay tuned for some hunting videos. It's almost September 15th here in Missouri.